Hello and welcome to FFRF's Ask an Atheist. I'm Ryan Jane, a staff attorney here at FFRF.
And I am Andrew Seidel, FFRF's Director of Strategic Response. And Ryan and I at FFRF, we track a lot of legislation, Ryan mostly. And today, we're going to be taking a look at a flood of bad bills around the country. Ryan, would you say that this is a legislative flood of biblical proportions?
I would. I'm the attorney who keeps track of all these bills, and right now we're keeping our eye on more than 490 bills. Wow. I wrote a blog about this last week, and the number then was around 450. So another 40 have come up just since last Thursday. So the waters are still rising.
Yeah, I was actually looking back at what we used to track, and it was like 1 to 200. It's just amazing how much more FFRF has grown and the Christian nationalist movement we're fighting has grown. Now, Ryan's going to tell us all about those interesting bills that we are keeping an eye on and what you can do to help. Very important. But first, if you have a question about the bills that we're talking about, or generally, you can submit those for Ryan or for me. Just put them right here in the Facebook chat. Or you can email them to askanatheist@ffrf.org. And we're going to get to those after we talk about a few things. And before we get to the bad bills, we're going to look at two specific things, Black History Month and Jeep. So I'm writing a new book called Weaponizing Religious Freedom. And I was deep into the research weeds. And I found something that I really wanted to share for Black History Month. So I was digging through the Supreme Court correspondence. And apparently, Justice Thurgood Marshall, right? The first Black Supreme Court Justice, the first Black Solicitor General, the founder of and chief counsel for the NAACP Legal Defense and Educational Fund, the lawyer who argued and won Brown versus Board of Education, one of 32 Supreme Court cases he argued, and one of 29 that he won. I mean, this guy's a titan by any definition, okay? Apparently, he thought that churches should pay property and income taxes. So let's take a look at this handwritten note. You can see it right there. Now let's zoom in on this just a little bit. But yeah, Marshall thought that churches, quote, churches should pay property and income taxes.
So what is that exactly that we're looking at there, Andrew, that note?
So this is, I was in Justice Powell's handwritten conference notes for a case called Lynch versus Donnelly, which Ryan knows and maybe some other FFRF members know. This is about a creche that was on government property, a nativity scene. So this is what Powell thought that Marshall said during the conference. So I read that wow in parentheses as sort of Powell's personal opinion on Marshall's stance. There is some ambiguity here, and I plan on running it down later. I just really thought it was worth sharing because it was so fascinating, and it's Black History Month, and Marshall's just this amazing, towering titan of a figure.
I think you're right too. Yeah, I think you're right that's what that wow means. That Powell wrote that down. Like, I can't believe this guy just said this. Like, he wants to tax churches. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, and it seems like a kind of exotic opinion these days, but it really wasn't back then. I mean, this is even something James Madison was worried about and wrote about in the Memorial and Remonstrance. But I could talk about that for way too long, and I'm going to get us off track. So before we get to the bad bills, we've got to hit one other thing, Jeep. So we're going to take a look at a clip of the commercial that Jeep aired at last week's Super Bowl. Featured Bruce Springsteen delivering what seems to be this message of solemn reconciliation. So let's just take a look at a little bit of a clip.
There's a chapel in Kansas, standing on the exact center of the lower 48. It never closes. All are more than welcome to come meet here in the middle. It's no secret. The middle has been a hard place to get to lately.
I mean, so that's just a little taste. You can see the whole thing online. It's about as subtle as a train wreck. Ryan, what struck you when you saw that?
Oh my gosh, I don't know where to begin about how disappointed I was in this ad. All sorts of different things, but honestly, the first thing that came to mind for me was if you remember that John Kasich video that he sent, I think to the DNC, where he was standing in this giant crossroads and he said, "Hey nation, we're at a crossroads." It's like, okay, dude, we get your symbolism. That's great. And I think that's what they were going for here, where they're like, this is the geographic center of the United States because we need to come together. And so that alone was just dumb. But I think the part that bothered everybody and really bothered me in a way that's totally different from like the unity that the president is talking about, for instance, is that the whole message of this was we should come together on Christianity. It was this chapel and this cross everywhere. That's the part that just drove me crazy.
Yeah, I mean, it really bothered me too. I mean, the Jeep ad did nothing that it set out to do, right? It was meant to be about unity, about getting back to that middle ground. And had it just been Bruce, the boss, saying those things, like maybe. But instead, they made the focus this arbitrary chapel at the center of the lower 48 states, choosing to ignore like a couple of our important states, all of our territories. I mean, there happen to be a lot of non-white people in those places, an unthinking omission, I'm sure. But, the imagery was overtly Christian. And more than that, it was overtly Christian nationalist. So for me, there's kind of these two big things, big problems with this for me. First, religion is never going to unify us. Religion is a divisive force. And to turn to religion in times of national unity is to exclude non-religious Americans, which are this huge percentage of the population. I mean, at least 1/3 now, pretty much. We're talking like 80 million Americans at least. So in reaching for unity, Jeep is dividing us along religious lines. Congratulations, you've undermined your central purpose. You've defeated yourself. And
yep.
I mean, this is kind of what I was getting at with the op-ed that I wrote for Biden's inauguration and how overtly religious it was. When you are striving for unity, turning to religion is just a huge mistake. Religion only unites those who believe in it. All non-adherents are automatically excluded. Biden quoted St. Augustine, and St. Augustine says that, Ryan, you and I, everybody who's producing this video, and most of the people watching this program, are going to burn in hell for all eternity. Right. That's not
Can't we all get behind
unity.
that?
Yeah, this is not unity. But Jeeps was worse even, right? Because where the Biden inauguration stopped short, maybe, the Jeep commercial forged ahead. And this for me is the second big problem. And Bruce can show some of the images. The Jeep commercial went beyond turning to religion to unify us and right into Christian nationalism. Right? That's not just counterproductive, but downright dangerous. I could not believe that this aired a month after the insurrection. I can't believe they thought that was a good idea. I mean, the message in this ad is the central message of Christian nationalism, right? That to be an American is to be a Christian, and to be a Christian is to be an American. That is the central point of Christian nationalism, that they are true Americans and everybody else is the others, the otherized. They're temporary. They're immigrants. They don't really belong here. They're not true Americans.
Yeah,
they want to read. I mean, yeah, they want to redefine what it is to be an American and then reshape our law according to that identity. And that's because, like we're going to talk about in a minute, their public policy rationale for in which many of the bills is going to attempt to advance that we're going to talk about. It's insensible. It's nonsense. It's idiotic. There's no good reason to slap "In God We Trust" on every piece of money or every public building. So instead, they have to claim that their beliefs, their identity, that they and the other Christian nationalists are the true heirs of the American experiment. But that's a lie, right? The entire Christian nationalist identity is based on disinformation and lies and myths. And this Jeep commercial, which supposedly promoted unity, latched on to those lies and myths and promoted the most divisive political theology this country has known. It reinforced the Christian nationalist lies for 96.4 million Americans who watched that. And we've seen waves of Christian nationalism throughout history. And on January 6th, it attacked the U.S. Capitol. And now 1 month later, you've got Jeep running an ad to sell cars and adopting this Christian nationalism. So to me, it's not just that the ad was shameful. It was, but it was also deeply dangerous. And if you don't believe me, like, go watch the impeachment hearing that is happening right now instead of this show.
Yeah, well, and it shows how deeply seated this is in so many people's psyche, because when you have this division that's been going on, it's so automatic for a lot of Americans to say, come on, guys, let's all come together. And what are we going to come together under? How about we can all come into this chapel and under this cross? That's what's the unifying factor is going to be.
Under the cross and the flag. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's awful.
Well, and on top of that, they excluded the Upper Peninsula of Michigan somehow in the process of that at the end, as the pointed out. Well, FFRF did put out an action alert asking our members to make consumer complaints to Jeep because of that, the commercial. So you can do that on our website if you want to take part. If you are on board with my and Andrew's rant here, you can help us out. Express your dissatisfaction to Jeep.
Yeah, let me get off my soapbox here, and I'll calm myself down. But speaking of action alerts, segue, we don't usually do that for consumer complaints. We usually do it for pending legislation, often for bad bills. But Ryan, like, not all state bills are bad. Some are good, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So like how many of the you're tracking? You said 480. Well, I'm just going to call it 500. How many of these 500 bills are good? Like, would actually help FFRF and have a secular country fight for state church separation? How many of those 500 are good?
So right now we have just over 100. It's 109 good bills that we're tracking and about 400 bad bills that we're tracking. So it's about 25%. And that's it's a little bit misleading, and I can explain why. So part of it is that it's the way that the legislators go about doing things. So the people who want to advance good pro-state state church legislation, they tend to write one bill, submit that bill, and then it goes through the process, just like you'd see on Schoolhouse Rock. That's kind of the process with the good bills. The bad bills, they do things a little bit differently, or at least lately what they've been doing. So like if you're wondering where these bills are coming from, these 500 bills, when I first saw that number, I kind of, popped my head out of the water and said, God, we're tracking a lot of bills. What's going on here? And I looked at the picture of the whole country as a whole and asked, where are these bills coming from? A lot of the bad bills are really clumped in certain areas. So
they're not coming. It's not coming like out of an even spread out of the country, but like clumped in some states.
Exactly. We've got 30 bad bills in Oklahoma, 20 in Texas, 20 in Montana, and taking the cake is Missouri, which has 45 bills. So 45 bad bills. There's some good bills there too. But so what happens is a lot of these are really similar. So for instance, they'll say, we want to criminalize abortion. We don't care that that's unconstitutional. We want to do it. And so instead of having one bill with lots of co-sponsors that they just go through the process, what they'll do is they're going to say, today we're going to introduce 15 different bills that all either criminalize or restrict abortion in some way. And we're just going to flood all of them through. And if one of them makes it to the finish line, we're golden. That's, I think, their mentality.
Yeah. So we have to track every single one of those to be sure, because it's sort of the shotgun approach, right? Like you throw as much at the wall as you can and something sticks, and it makes it harder for us. We could miss one. Now, Missouri rings a bell for me. You have gone to Missouri to testify against bills.
That's right. And so, Missouri is really a fascinating place in terms of the state legislation. Jefferson City, there's not really anything there except for the state capitol. So this is all that happens there. But they're very busy. I can give them that. There's lots of bills going through the process. So just to give a little smattering, a little example, they have a bill that would expand non-medical vaccine exemptions. Great thing to do on the hopefully eve of a pandemic as we're trying to get vaccines out there. They say, well, let's make sure as many people as want to can opt out of that. I mentioned restricting abortion, reproductive rights, promoting concealed carry in churches. There's a bill that says, any law to the contrary notwithstanding, anyone who wants to conceal carry a gun into a church can do that, because, of course, that's what we need. Voucher-like schemes that would devastate public schools and give taxpayer funds to religious schools. And then the one that you mentioned, this is one that in the before times I went and testified in Jefferson City myself, and this bill is now back for the third time in a row. So back when we did News Bites, I did a news bite about this. We have a little clip of when I went and testified about it.
Oh, let's take a look at that.
I offered the committee the story of Joanne Bell. was a parent in a lawsuit challenging religious promotion by her children's public school. Because her identity as a parent was known, Joanne and her kids suffered outrageous backlash while the case was ongoing. They received numerous threatening calls to their home. The kids were called demon worshippers. One of them had an upside-down cross hung inside of their locker. Joanne actually had her head shoved into a car by an employee of the school district, and ultimately their house was firebombed and destroyed.
So what's
Shocking
happening
stuff.
here, and the reason we're talking about this is that this is commonplace with state church plaintiffs. So Andrew and I and other state church attorneys know that when you pop your head out and say, as a citizen, I object to the religious promotion in the local government, the backlash can be absolutely severe, as I described with Joanne Bell in that case. And so the one mechanism.
Let me pause you right there, because one of the that people may realize, that one of the reasons we take cases as FFRF is to help protect those people and to kind of draw that fervor onto the organization as opposed to those people. And another thing that we do to try to protect those people is also to get them protective orders. This is why when you have cases like that are brought by Doe or Roe, that's because there have been threats against that plaintiff, or we need to protect the privacy of that plaintiff. And that's something that we do pretty regularly in state church cases, because the violence that those people face is very typical. I mean, we've had experts testify about this. It's disturbingly common. And so what was the legislature trying to do with this bill, Ryan?
So what they were trying to do is the author of this bill actually got a letter from me that was from FFRF that I wrote that was about a cross that was on the side of the road, and we weren't sure if it was public or private land. So we sent a typical letter saying, hey, Missouri government, can you look into this, figure out what's going on? And of course, we don't disclose who our complainant is. We're just writing it from FFRF for the same reason. And he was so mad that he couldn't name who it was that complained to us, that he apparently doesn't know the difference between sending a letter and filing a lawsuit. So he wanted to make sure that if you file a lawsuit about state church separation and only about state church separation, that you cannot have a pseudonym, which is just crazy, because this is something we argue about in front of the judge, right? We say, Judge, this is needed. This is an actual danger. And if the judge agrees with us, which they often do, then they get the protective order. And what this bill would do is say, judges cannot do that. Even if the judge says, oh yeah, this person could be killed if I let this out in the public, the state would come back and say, we passed a law that says you cannot protect them. So basically trying to bully them into dropping the lawsuit.
Yeah, I mean, the only way you get a protective order is if the judge weighs the evidence and believes there's a credible threat. Otherwise, we do have a presumption in our legal system of open and transparent proceedings. So, I mean, this is essentially another way to threaten people who are willing to stand up and defend the First Amendment, champions of the First Amendment. And I should mention, too, FFRF gives out awards to people who do this successfully, because we recognize that it is such a brave and important thing to do. So Ryan testified against that bill, successfully knocked it down for the past couple of years. It's back. We're going to keep fighting it. Are there any other interesting bills that kind of really struck your fancy this year, maybe a particularly bad bill?
There are, there's a number. There's one I wanted to highlight. This is actually out of North Dakota. So usually a slightly more quiet state, but this is North Dakota's HB 1476. And boy, this bill does a lot. The basic idea of this bill is I think that the author must think they're very clever. The author is unfortunately named Terry Jones, for people who love Monty Python as much as me. It's really sad. But so this Terry Jones, not that Terry Jones, is his theory is that if we can, he wants to flip the Establishment Clause by saying that all of the things that he doesn't agree with, like LGBTQ rights and state church separation, are under the umbrella of secular humanism, which he's saying is a religion, and therefore promoting any of that stuff violates the Establishment Clause. That's his whole scheme. So his idea is that not only is secular humanism a religion, but flying a gay pride flag would violate the Establishment Clause because it promotes secular humanism. Prohibiting conversion therapy would violate the Establishment Clause for the same reason. And he even mentions Drag Queen Story Hour that we have a picture of here that, if people aren't familiar with, is this wonderful, fun event where you have drag queens come to libraries and read a story to children. And that's all it is. There's no even discussion of LGBTQ rights, nothing of that, no mention of religion whatsoever. And he's trying to argue that this violates the Establishment Clause because it advances the religion of secular humanism, which is just, it's such pretzel logic. It's hard to follow. When it comes down to it, he's just like, I don't like this, and this is how I'm going to label it. And the last
but
thing
it's just crazy because he's labeling everything I don't like or disagree with is a religion. And by the way, now I'm for state church separation when it comes to that made up non-religion religion thing that I'm talking about. It's nonsense.
Exactly. And he finishes the bill with one last piece of nonsense that I found just it's you have to laugh because it's so frustrating. It's so stupid and heartless, but you have to just take a step back and be like, someone actually wrote this down, and it's just amazing. So what he said was that because sexual orientation, he says, isn't proven to be an immutable trait, it's therefore a matter of religious faith.
Wow.
It's just not only does this discussion not belong in a bill in the first place, but that's just one of the dumbest things I've ever heard, and I don't even know what to say about it. But so I'm fortunately,
I know what to say about it. Hang on, let me say something about that, because one thing I used to do back in the before times when I could travel the country and talk about secularism and fighting for a secular America and the founding myth and all this fun stuff was I used to encourage people to run for office and run for office as an open non-believer, as an atheist or an agnostic or a free thinker, whatever you choose to call yourself. And I would sometimes get people who would raise their hand and say, yeah, but I don't feel qualified to be on school board or city council. That person is in a state legislature writing bills like that. You are more than qualified. Like, go run for office. Look at the people who are in office. You're qualified. Go do it. Sorry, Ryan. Continue.
No, fantastic point. And at least, for what it's worth, that bill is one of the ones that's already dead. So some of these bills that when you see those just like laughably horrendous bills, fortunately, most other state legislatures look at this. And what happens procedurally is the bill gets put into a committee, and then the members of the committee look at this and they say, yeah, we are not passing this. So they just kind of slide it under the rug and it's gone.
Yeah, so it goes to die a quiet death in committee. Now, and that's one of the reasons that we see bills kind of come back year after year after year. And you've been tracking state church bills for 4 years now, not for 4 years, but for many years now. We see these same ones come up, but are there new ones that you're seeing that are particularly like groundbreaking? We've never seen this kind of thing before.
Yeah, that's a great question, because a lot of people watching this are probably saying, I've heard of these sorts of bills before. What comes to mind is with the pandemic happening, there are this spate of bills that we're seeing in actually more states than not. It's something like 35 states have a bill that is designed to stop the governor from using emergency orders to limit in-person worship services. And so this is a problem for obvious reasons. I'm sure everyone's seen this. It's been in the news. There's court cases and everything. But it strikes me as this kind of such a clear confrontation between reality and just religious privilege at the expense of reality and at the expense of public health, where the science is all saying very clearly that staying together in groups indoors for long periods of time where you're singing and talking and hugging, that is what we call a super spreader event, and we should not do that. And so that's exactly the sort of thing that the state government should be allowed to say, to place limitations on. And this is a direct attempt to take that away, to say, no, you can't stop people from doing this exact thing. And sadly, it has some support from Supreme Court justices nowadays who look at this and they say, like, oh, well, yeah, why should you be allowed to go into a liquor store and buy beer if you're not allowed to go worship, because of course worship is more important than alcohol. So
yeah, it's absurd, and I mean this is weaponizing religious freedom, and this is something I'm just deeply worried about. Like, yeah, you can go into a liquor store for 2 minutes and get a bottle and come home. You're not sitting down in the aisles of the liquor store and singing hymns and holding hands and passing collection plates, and you're not there for 2 hours. And everybody doesn't show up at the same time, and everybody doesn't leave at the same time, right? And by the way, if we don't sell people liquor, the many who are addicted to it are going to go through withdrawal and end up in hospitals, overwhelming the system, the medical system more. Like there are plenty of good, and that's what the experts tell us. There are good reasons for these public policies. And when you let what Justice Kagan called in a blistering dissent this past weekend, the judges become these armchair epidemiologists, people are going to die. I mean, these bills and these Supreme Court decisions are going to kill Americans. There's just no doubt about that. So that's scary stuff, and it's obviously new stuff because it's COVID related. And I mean, one of the things that's coming back is we tracked a lot of bills that are trying to put "In God We Trust" in public schools, on government property. What's going on with those? I mean, this is something we get a lot of complaints about. Our members are really passionate about. Did those bills pass? Are there any that we're watching now? What's going on with those?
Yeah, so we saw some Project Blitz bills pass last year, and I'm sure people who followed FFRF in the last couple of years have heard about this. So Project Blitz, if anyone needs a refresher, is this concerted effort to ram through a whole bunch of Christian nationalist bills through every state legislature. And this is a picture of their handbook. You can see the sorts of things that they are pushing. It's a long list of model legislation that does the sort of stuff you can see on your screen. Initially, what they want to do is seemingly harmless things like putting "In God We Trust" up in every public school classroom, and other things like that you could see someone arguing, like, what's really the harm in here? But then what they want to do is to turn that into saying, see, we're all united on this religious front. And so now the next phase is to leverage that to turn that into saying, well, since we all trust in God and we know that God doesn't like homosexuality, we need to ban same-sex marriage, for instance. And
I mean, this is what I was talking about in my rant about the Jeep commercial, right? Like they're first trying to redefine the American identity, and then they're trying to redefine the law according to that identity. That's what Project Blitz is doing, and it's got these different tiers to do it.
Exactly. And so we've fortunately, small silver lining of the pandemic last year is that Project Blitz was really slowed down last year. We didn't see a lot of those bills pass, but it is definitely back with a vengeance right now. There are "In God We Trust" bills all over the place, a number of other bills that are from that handbook, and then even there's one that is in New Mexico. This is New Mexico SB 246 that would put a Ten Commandments display in every classroom, which if you're, especially if you're familiar with this area of case law, that should ring a bell, because there's a little Supreme Court case that is about exactly that such a law, which is called Stone v. Graham. And so the Supreme Court looked at that and said, no, what we would all say is the incredibly obvious conclusion. Of course, that promotes religion on behalf of the public school. So no, you can't put a Ten Commandments display up in every classroom. And I also love, you talk about this in your book very, very well, but I love discussing the question of, well, it doesn't specify which version of the Ten Commandments to put up. So are we putting up the commandments like you can't cook a goat in its mother's milk? Is that what we're going to be teaching our first graders? And a lot most Christians are just deer in headlights. And
another really fun thing to point out when you're talking about these two is that the public displays edit the Ten Commandments. So like the typical display is the Exodus 20 display, which begins, "For I am the Lord your God, you shall have no other gods before me," right? Like difficult to write a sentence that is more in conflict with the American Constitution and system of law than that. Okay, I mean, fundamentally un-American. But leave that aside. The commandments also, they sanction slavery twice. They treat women as chattel, and they promise to punish innocent children to the third and fourth generation if parents have the temerity to exercise the right protected by the First Amendment and explore other religions. And that tends to get edited out of the public displays of the Ten Commandments. And I'm sure it wouldn't be in the classroom displays either. So we're displaying these God's most moral laws as an example of how, the Bible has everything right. But then we're using our modern morality to edit those immoral parts out of the law, which is just, it's this innate, inherent hypocrisy in it that you can't escape. And I always enjoy pointing out, like, go look at the Ten Commandments monuments that's up at the Texas Capitol or in Colorado at the Denver Capitol, and they don't have they've edited out the immoral parts of the Ten Commandments, which is just fascinating. Yeah. So, okay.
It harkens back to the Jeep commercial to me, where it's this ignorance where so many people out there will assume that everyone actually agrees when they say, look, we all can agree that the Ten Commandments is a great document, right? We all support that. And they actually think that atheists are going to be on board with that. And it's just like, have you read them? Do you know what you're talking about?
And the answer to that is no. They always come back to don't murder. Okay, so we have all these bills. You organize them. You track them. But the main thing that I'm sure everybody who's watching this wants to know is, that's great that you guys are keeping track, but what can we do? So tell us, what do we do, and what can our members do to help?
Yeah, that is always the big question. And so the biggest thing that you can do if you're watching right now and you care about this stuff, you know this is this like blitz season where everything's happening right now and you want to be a part of helping us. The main thing is, if you're not signed up for FFRF action alerts, get signed up. And there's two ways you can do that. The first is you can text FFRF to 52886. So just send a text message to the number 52886. Just type FFRF in the box. You send that, and then when we send out an action alert to your area, it will come to your phone, and then it's a really nice automated system. It'll just auto connect you to call your legislatures, your legislators, and you can weigh in on these bills. You can also sign up for a trial membership if you're not an FFRF member. It only costs $40 a year to be a member, but I understand if. Yeah, and so please consider joining. We need all the help we can, but if nothing else, you can sign up for a 3-month trial membership and at the website on the screen, and that is another way that you can get involved with the action alerts. So that's the main thing if you want to get involved with the work that we're doing. But the other advice that I have is a few things. One is there's all this media attention about federal legislatures, right? We always hear so much about what's happening in Congress. You don't hear as much about what's happening in state legislatures because there's lots of them. It has less reach, and it's local media that is tasked with covering them, so it's tough. But remember, you as an individual have much more influential power over your state legislature than you do over Congress, for obvious reasons. It's just much fewer people. So you should be interested in what's going on in your state and local level. If you haven't personally met your state representatives, you should. It doesn't have to be about a particular thing. Just make the time, and especially in this COVID era, just see if they'll do a little, 10-minute Zoom chat with you, and you can just tell them the things you care about. Or show up to one of their town halls.
Yeah, show up to one of their town halls that they got going on. All great advice. What else?
And generally, I think be a squeaky wheel. The other side is really, really good at this. People who don't like state-church separation, they just won't shut up about it. And so they have outsized influence because they're always there. You always hear from them. And so it makes them seem larger than they are. And so you have to combat that. You have to be squeaky yourself. Make noise about these things. Hearings are often virtual now. So when there's a hearing on one of these bills, it used to be that you had to take off of work, go to the state capitol like I did in Jefferson City, and that's how you had to attend a hearing. Nowadays, a lot of times you can, over your lunch break, just tune into these hearings and weigh in. So that's a great idea. And then my last piece of advice is to utilize social media in a good way. So we're all on social media, and I've always advised people that there are very limited returns to getting in heated arguments on social media, even though I'm sure we're all guilty of that from time to time.
No.
Yeah, I know. But what you can do is think about what the good thing about social media is, which is that it allows you to send messages to your entire network very quickly, very easily. So there's only so much you can do as one person, right? So the whole idea of democracy is supposed to be that you have to get a crowd of people to get an idea to advance. So use social media for that. Instead of just getting in the dirt with someone who disagrees with you, when there's something you care about, just put out a message that says, hey, there's this bill that I think is good or that I think is bad, and there's a hearing on it. I'm going to be testifying. If anyone else can show up and support what I'm doing, I'd love to have you do that, and just put that out there. And I think that's something that a lot of people don't really do. Maybe they feel kind of awkward about doing that, but you have a lot of leverage there, and I think I'd like to see people do that more.
Me too. So we're going to get to people's questions now. Again, if you've got questions, just go ahead and ask them right there in the comments or there, wherever it is. And you can email them to askanatheist@ffrf.org as well. One of the first questions we have, Ryan, I'm going to build on that, is from Ann Ben Dixon, who's I was going to say faithful watcher, and I'll go ahead and go with that, a loyal watcher of the live show. What do we do about awful legislations in states like Iowa, where there is that Republican trifecta? I guess where she means one party that is maybe one hostile to state church separation, has all three branches of government.
Yeah, it's a really good question. That is so frustrating to be in that situation. And I mean, your frustration is not misplaced. You're right that there are places where the policy preferences of the people in power is known and unwavering, and they've just said, we are going to pass these horrible bills. I don't care what you have to say about it. And so my advice there is, first of all, don't let them wear you down, right? Don't give up. Don't just throw your hands up and say, well, this is hopeless. I guess I need to move to another state. So first of all, make sure that they don't have the ability of saying that all their constituents agree with them, right? Because you'll hear that from a lot of these districts. Well, they'll say, I got 500 messages from my constituents, and not a single one wanted me to say no to this bill. Don't let them say that.
I think that's so important and worth emphasizing. It's almost more important in areas like that to raise up your voice in opposition, and not give them sort of a free rein and be able to do whatever they want. You still have to make it hard for them. And I know a lot of people have or maybe feel a little bit hopeless about the idea that they would actually have an impact. And I would really like to counsel people against that. You may not change a vote, but that doesn't mean you don't have an impact, especially if you are doing the things that Ryan says, like getting other people to speak out as well. Like you don't know. It may not be changing a vote, but it could have an impact. It could, for instance, we know for a fact that some of our work has made legislators keep quiet on bills, not whip votes, not push their fellow legislators to act in a certain way. And that can have a big impact. So don't just think of it in terms of the final yes/no vote. There's a lot of impact you can have between that vote and your reaching out to the legislator to express your opinion.
Yeah, and another underutilized resource is with local newspapers are always looking for local writers to submit op-eds or letters to the editor about things. And legislators read these and take that as the community pulse. So, and they love showing contrarian positions. So if you're in a position where you don't mind having your name on, a public version of what you think about this, totally do that. Because there's some people who can't, right? Because of the issue we were talking about before, that if it becomes known publicly that you're the one who's not supporting this, that could be dangerous. So if you're in a spot where it's safe for you to do that, I would say you should really do that. Write into your local newspaper and just say, hey, there's a lot of support for this this bill to put 10 commandments in every classroom. I want to tell you why, as a local community member and public school parent, I don't support this idea. They would love to run that because they like controversy and they like intelligent views on both sides. So you'll get published, and that's a very wide range of influence you can have.
So if you're in New Mexico watching this, go ahead and write a letter to the editor to your local paper, write an op-ed. And George, actually, we have a question about that. I believe it's about that bill. Jordan O'Brien asks, which version of the Ten Commandments did they use? I think Jordan might mean they being the New Mexico bill.
Yeah, I'm sure. And yeah, it's a great question. I asked for that too. I actually double checked the text of the bill just to make sure, because maybe they would say the Ten Commandments from Exodus 34, but no, it just says the Ten Commandments because most believers don't know that there are multiple versions. So yeah, wouldn't that be a great surprise if they pass the bill, everything's going along swimmingly, and then you just put up the fun version and they say, what the hell is this?
Deuteronomy 5 or Deuteronomy 27. Also, Jordan, on the off chance that you're asking about the monuments that we briefly mentioned, those monuments typically mention that they're typically the Exodus 20 version, which are not actually called the Ten Commandments, but those are the famous Charlton Heston Ten Commandments. And actually, a lot of those monuments were put up to push the Nelson DeMille movie, The Ten Commandments. The Fraternal Order of the Eagles helped put them up there. They are heavily edited. The Freedom from Religion Foundation, I should say, successfully got that monument that was in Milwaukee removed when it was first inaugurated and put up. It was Yul Brynner was there at the unveiling, and we actually have photos somewhere around the office. I don't think Bruce, I'm sorry, we should have thought of this beforehand. We didn't know we were going to go here. But we actually have photos of a crane lifting up the Ten Commandments monument and loading it onto a truck. I think Dan Barker went over to Milwaukee and took photos for that. This happened in the 80s. So yeah, we FFRF has successfully gotten a number of Ten Commandments displays removed, including at public schools, and then that one in Milwaukee. Anyway, lots of really interesting stuff. If you want to know more about the 4 different sets and why they're all fundamentally un-American, I do cover that in The Founding Myth. Eddie Riggs asks, what's the name of that song that you used before your introduction? So I think Eddie is referring to Get Off Your Knees and Get to Work by FFRF's co-president, Dan Barker. And I'm pretty sure we sell that album or the song with that album in the FFRF store, which is ffrf.org/shop, if you want to check that out.
I believe he's on Spotify as well. He has he's very, very quippy, clever, and professional jazz pianist. So he's the whole package. Definitely check out Dan's work.
Okay, and actually we have a question from Dan Barker. 2 questions. Should I cancel my Jeep order now? Dan asks.
Yeah, probably.
If you've ordered a Jeep, cancel it and call them and tell them to apologize, and then you'll buy it again. That's a good idea. And then Dan also asks, and we should clarify this. Dan asks, are they still calling it Project Blitz?
Right. So they are not. I think that it was once they started to get scrutiny for what they were doing. So this was they called their organization Project Blitz. They said we're going to blitz the legislatures, and once people started to say, hey, this is really, really bad. And then, of course, there's also the very unfortunate choice of words with the similarity to Blitzkrieg.
I have to say, we have to say that. I think that was deliberate. I don't think that was an unfortunate choice. I think they did that on purpose. And that's why I don't care. I'm sorry. You want to change your name? Great. But you already gave the game away, and we all are going to continue to call you Project Blitz. But they did change it, Ryan. What do you? It's something stupid and milquetoast and Orwellian.
Yeah, it's completely forgettable, which is why I just can't remember it. And but it's those same groups. It's it's wall builders and the
is it Freedom for All? I think it might be Freedom for All.
I think that's right. I think that might be right. Yeah. So it's the most forgettable thing ever because they want to be under the radar now. Yes.
The whole point is Christian privilege. The whole point is Christian supremacy. Don't tell me you're for freedom for all.
It's freedom for all as long as you come into this chapel with us, which everyone's welcome.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. We have somebody who asks, where did Andrew get that fetching mug? For those of you here, let me do this, Bruce. Let's see here. So for those of you who, hopefully everybody can see that nicely now. So that is the Unabashed Atheist mug that we sell also in the FFRF store. They're handmade. I mean, it's like, and it's a nice mug, and I love the shape of it because it is really nice for keeping your coffee warm. Here, hang on.
And I can say back when
they're handmade.
Yeah, and back when we were in the office, you and I and several other people are pretty hardcore coffee drinkers, and we have several of those and have never broken one in the office, to my knowledge. So they're very hardy.
Yeah. They are. They're worth it. Check them out. Okay, so Julian asks, how do we get In God We Trust off our currency?
Yeah, that's a big question. It's something that we've been and others have been trying to do for a long time, and it's a very tricky thing. I mean, I think the practical answer at this point, barring a large pendulum shift back in the right direction for the Supreme Court, which is going to take decades, the only other solution is to do that legislatively, because there's this fantasy that the courts have come up with to say that this is actually not a religious message. They're saying that
basically it's like so minor, who cares? Like it's essentially like what it boils down to. But I mean, Brian, I think you're right, and I think that's why it's worth talking about on this show in particular, right? Like just because we aren't going to get a court to agree with us that it's unconstitutional because Christian nationalists have basically captured the Supreme Court, that doesn't mean that we can't get it to change. It doesn't, and I firmly believe that those mottos that religious motto is going down and coming off our money. I actually have very little doubt about that. I think it's more a question of when that's going to happen, how long it's going to take us to get there, and a big part of that is mustering our political power to make and force that change. And I have to say, like, that's one of the reasons that Ryan mentioned joining FFRF is important when we're talking about this legislation, right? Like, yeah, we definitely want your $40 a year. It helps pay our salary and lets us do this, and that's important. But more importantly, it joins your voice with ours. And then when we write a letter, when Ryan goes to testify in Missouri, or we write a testimony or a letter of complaint, we say, look, we represent 30 people in your town, or 300 people, or 3,000 people, or 30,000 people, right? Like, it makes a big difference to just join your voice with ours. It gives us a lot more persuading ability, pressure to put on these people. It really is worth doing.
Yeah, and more than ever, I think people are coming to realize the problems with In God We Trust and the money, as well as Under God and the Pledge, which has met the same fate in court. But it's just, people kind of realize that this is, even though they grew up with it oftentimes, they are realizing now that this is actually not much older than them, and it's divisive. It's not true, and there's just no reason to have it. So I think we're moving in the right direction in terms of public support on these issues, but it's a hard, long battle.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. We're moving in the wrong direction in the courts because of the composition of the courts, because the courts have been packed, but we're moving in the right direction demographically and therefore legislatively. So, and there are a couple other questions about other things like that, like chaplains and rabbis, and I'm going to cut it here because the answer for Ryan and I is going to be the same on those things. And we do actually have another episode of Ask an Atheist previously. You can go back and check out there, Alan. So Ryan, any last thoughts before I take us out?
No, that's pretty much all I got. Just stay active. I wrote a blog about these things too, so if there's anything that I touched on that you were wondering, what was that bill or whatever, it's full of links and stuff, so you can just look up, Ryan Jane FFRF bills, or it'll pop up the recent blog that I wrote.
And tell people how they can sign up for the action alerts again.
So you can text FFRF to the number 52886. Or else you can go to our website and sign up, just join us for a membership or a trial membership, and that's another good way that you can get signed up with the action alerts.
And that is our show for the day. Please be sure to tune in to FFRF's broadcast. This is our television broadcast, not of Ask an Atheist, but of Free Thought Matters. This week's guest is just one of my favorite people. He's a constitutional scholar and a law professor, Jay Wexler. I love Jay Wexler. He wrote Holy Hullabaloos and Our Non-Christian Nation. Anyway, you can see Free Thought Matters on TV stations around the U.S. or on YouTube and our Facebook channel. Thank you so much for watching and for writing in your your questions, and we will see you next week for another episode of FFRF's Ask an Atheist.